Okay, it is now 12:02, so we'll get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to session 3 of the UCCS Undergraduate Research Showcase. It's been going great so far. It's been fantastic to be able to hear about everybody's projects. And even though the time is for each allotted, each project is short, it's been wonderful to just get an overview of every single poster, which it's often hard to do when all of the posters are assembled in a room and we're forced to walk around while eating lunch. So looking for silver linings. Anyway, thanks to all the students for all the hard work that you have invested in preparing for this day. Thank you to the internship hosts for making opportunities available to our students, even under these very special conditions requiring, in most cases, remote access. And thanks to the staff, both administrative and academic, for making this happen. So we have a lot to accomplish, so let's get going.
All right, great. And so the format for today is that we're going to have our students go ahead and do their presentation, and then we will go ahead and take a question from the audience. It will go to the internship host supervisor's office. And so, and however, if the office does not have a question, then we'll open it up to the general audience. If we have time at the end, we'll go ahead and do kind of just a general Q&A and open kind of to any of the students who presented today. And just make sure if you do ask a question, just state your name and affiliation and then your question. So, and with that, we will go ahead and get started with Armando Gonzalez.
Awesome. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone, for being here and participating. My name is Armando Gonzalez, and I'm a sociology student here at UC Davis. And so my research, The Illusion of Standard, is an investigation of California's current system of standardized testing. Now, historically, African-American, Latinx, and economically disadvantaged students have performed more poorly on testing than their white, Asian, and higher socioeconomic status peers. California system of standardized testing, as well as the way that schools are funded. So based on that, I would hypothesize that higher economic disparity is related to lower rates of standards meeting on the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or the CAS. Also, I hypothesize that the relation between economic disparity and standards meeting is greater than that of ethnicity in standards meeting. So in my research, I look at students and their passing rates on the math section of this exam. So we look at students that are and are not economically disadvantaged. We have a passing rate of about 30%, and that's where the test was administered. And this recent year, the gap did close only by a couple percentage points. And then moving on here, we see that there's a gap of about 50% between Black students who have low passing rates and students with the highest passing rates. And unfortunately, over time, that has not really changed, rather it's only been a uniform increase across all the students. And so, based on these findings, I would conclude that the CAS does not alleviate any of the inequalities that have existed, and rather we just see that students are adapting to the new testing format, as seen by students from Chris. So that recommend on bolstering funding for schools that are serving students and offering the more strict guidelines for how those funds are used, including raising teacher salaries, reducing classes, and increasing student support services. Thank you for your time, and I'd love to field any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Armando. And so Armando interned with the California Fair Political Practices Commission. And so if anyone has a question from the FEPC, that'd be great. If you can go ahead and just raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and call on you and unmute you. And if not, we'll open it up to the general. All right, well, I'll go ahead and open it up to the general audience.
Armando, hey, Ross here, your TA for all the classes at UCCS. So since you're the expert on this presentation here, Why did you look at the math passing rates only for CASP? Don't they have other passing rates as well? Like I think English maybe is involved, or can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Ross. That's a great question. So actually, yeah, you're correct. There are two sections to this exam. There is the English language arts section and the math section. And I decided to go with the math section because with the English language arts section, the results are quite similar. So I honestly could have gone either way with it. So I decided to go with math. I feel like inherently math is a little bit less of a subjective subject. And something that is a little more standard across students.
Great. Thank you so much. So thank you, Armando, for the presentation, and thank you, Ross, for the question. And so our next student is Lila Smedel.
Okay. Okay, everyone can see it?
Yep,
Great.
looks great.
Great. Okay, hi everyone, my name is Lila Schmedel. I'm a sociocultural anthropology major at UC Davis, and today I will be discussing with everyone how increasing diversity at UCs can aid students in their academic achievement and college experience. So since the 1960s, affirmative action has been a popular topic aimed to reduce socioeconomic and professional gaps among minorities and their white counterparts. The lack of representation of non-white groups has always been an issue in the University of California systems, which shows the need for such policies. To examine the need for affirmative action, I sought to establish the relationship between racial diversity at UC institutions as the independent variable and academic achievement and campus climate as the dependent. I took data from the UC Information Center on student and faculty demographics and conducted a survey of 70 non-white students on their feelings about campus diversity. From this, I established the following. 1, Black students and Native Americans suffer the most in representation. 2, in the classroom, non-white students are always the minority in their majors. And 3, the majority of non-white students highly value diversity and feel that it enhances their academic achievement. To improve this, reform needs to take place in admissions where race needs to be seen more heavily as a significant factor among factors. We need to follow the progress of students of color with recurring 5-year goals and data reflections based upon academic achievement and student body demographics. And with that, I will see if there are any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Lila. That was great. And so Lila has been interning with the California Department of Justice Communications Office for Attorney General Javier Becerra. And so if anyone from the office would like to go ahead and ask the question or ask a question of Lila. And if you just raise your hand, I can go ahead then and unmute you. All right, then we'll go ahead and just open it up for general questions then from the audience.
Hi, Lila. This is Professor Jordan Quila from your Poem 196E class, the class that this poster is for. You mentioned, needing to increase or take into account racial and these things as bigger factors than they are now. I was just wondering how that would work with, given, recent or not so recent now, I guess, SCOTUS, Supreme Court cases and how race can play into these type of things. I was wondering how, if you would talk about that a little bit and your thoughts.
I guess you're kind of asking about like the constitutionality and legality of using race in admissions primarily?
Yeah, basically what would happen if you tried to increase it? You think there are ways to do so without, dealing with, getting into some of those issues maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I would say the consensus around approaching race in like educational settings and professional settings is primarily that it, like, as I said, it has to be seen as a factor among factors. And essentially when you're proposing something like a solution for something, it can't only benefit a single group in that way. So it's like, we can't say, for example, in my poster, I focus a lot on African and American and Black students. We can't say, okay, we want to boost these numbers for these students and only these students. I'm kind of making the argument that there is more benefit in the academic achievement of all students of color, as well as enhancing their college experience. So it kind of goes beyond just the smaller demographic, it actually helps everyone as a whole. So that would be the primary argument I would give there. So it doesn't kind of have that, I suppose, like the argument would be like discriminatory where only one small group is benefiting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lila, for your presentation, and thank you, Jordan, for your question. And so our next student is Daniela Figueroa.
And can you see it? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniela Figueroa. I am a fourth year from UC Santa Barbara. And according to the California Department of Education, in the 2018 to 2019 school year, there were about 1.2 million English learners enrolled in the public schools, and unfortunately contributing to the existing achievement gap. Schools have the option of instructing English learners through bilingual programs as an alternative, hoping to improve academically. I was actually enrolled in a bilingual program myself, which is why I chose to center my research project on the question of how effective California's bilingual programs have been for English learners. I hypothesize that English learners are more likely to reach English proficiency if they learn in a bilingual classroom setting. So to test that, I have created a small case study where I compared 10 elementary schools of Mount Diablo Unified School District here in my county, Contra Costa, and 5 of these schools offer a bilingual program and 5 don't. And to measure their effectiveness, I compared LPAC scores from the 2018 to 2019 school year and how many English learners reclassified from the years 2016 to 2019. And as I compared the results, I found that there was no huge distinction in scores of schools that offer a bilingual program and compared with those that don't, suggesting that learning in the presence of a bilingual program puts them to no huge advantage. I'm not discouraging these programs 100%. I do believe they can be effective for some students, and I put myself as an example, but I would suggest evaluating these programs further to see how we can improve them and consider other factors that can contribute to English learners' low performance, such as the availability of bilingual teachers, funds allocated towards the programs, and resources. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Daniela. And so, Daniela interned with the Consulate General of Mexico. And so if there is someone from the office that would like to go ahead and ask her her question, otherwise we will go ahead and open it up to the general audience. So. All right, we'll go ahead and open a question up from the general audience.
Hi, Daniela. This is Travis Baker. I'm your professor for POA 95 here at UC Center Sacramento. And I was just interested to see that in the 2 groups that you chose, those with a bilingual, without a bilingual, the percent speaking Spanish as their first language seems to be a pretty big difference there, along with the percent socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so maybe it just kind of made me think, and wonder if you could comment about the role that Spanish itself plays in these bilingual programs. And if, you know, I'm wondering if those, for the schools that don't have a bilingual program, you know, 88% of those students aren't Spanish first students. And so I'm wondering what other languages these students are coming in with as their first language, and if that presents any unique challenges for bilingual programs.
Okay, thank you for the question. So as I was collecting the data, I found that other languages that they spoke happened to be like Vietnamese, or well, Vietnamese was like mostly the biggest one in Spanish, but I believe that there's less Spanish speaking because there's not many Spanish speaking students there. In general, they have less English learners. And so I just thought it was interesting to include why they were socioeconomically disadvantaged, because I thought maybe it could influence as to why there's less, like their performance is lower. But I found that most of the Spanish speaking students were like driven to the schools where they had these bilingual programs. So that's what I think, so.
Great, thank you, Daniela, I appreciate it. And thank you, Travis, for the question. And so our next student is Annette Garcia.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. So hello everyone, my name is Annette Garcia and I was interested on the importance of federal funding for the low-income community. So my research question was, does a supplemental and nutritional assistance program impact the poverty rate for the low-income community at the state or federal level? Over the years, there has been a huge decline in SNAP participation among minority groups, especially after 2016, as seen on the first graph. Politics plays a huge role in how low-income communities are helped. My hypothesis was that more participation will cause low-income families to be financially stable and the poverty rates will drop. So I did a quantitative observational study looking at each county in California for their SNAP participation and poverty rates for 2008 through 2012 and 2015 through 2017. My independent variable was SNAP participation and my dependent variable was the poverty level measured as individuals and then the California poverty measure. So for through the graph in the middle, you're able to see for each county the SNAP participation on one side and the poverty level on the other throughout these two periods. My findings suggest that 56.1% of the counties decreased in SNAP participation and an increase in poverty rate, while 43.9% of the counties decreased participation yet decreased its poverty rate. Overall, there was a positive correlation between SNAP participation and poverty rates. Many counties rely on SNAP funding to help its low-income community and lower its poverty rate. So I suggest more federal funding for these programs, especially to help today's economy grow during COVID-19. Thank you. Any questions?
Great. Thank you so much, Annette. And so, Annette interned with the Consulate General of Mexico. And so we'll go ahead and open up, if there's a question from the office, we'll take that first. All right, and then we'll go ahead and take a question from the audience. All right, Hannah Palmer. Let's see here. Yep, there you go.
Hi, this is Hannah Palmer. I'm a Gold Fellow this quarter, and my question for you is, how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic will impact this relationship and these people who are using these systems?
Yes, thank you. So basically, many people during COVID-19 became unemployed and are relying on volunteer centers or food centers. So if these people were given the CalFresh benefits, they probably would be more financially stable without having to use their money that they're using for other bills. They'd use it on they wouldn't be using it on their food. They'd be using it on bills. So the economy would grow. There's also a statistic I included where there's like $1 in SNAP participation increases the economy by 1.70 cents. So there's a benefit between COVID-19 and the SNAP participation. Most of the counties that did increase the SNAP participation did have a lower poverty rate. So I think there would really be a good increase in the economy.
Great, thank you so much, Annette, and thank you, Hannah, for the question. And so our next student is Alondra Santiago.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alondra Santiago, and I am presenting on the roaring poverty in Tulare County, rural California. My research objective was to focus on finding why there is a high poverty in Tulare County. My hypothesis explained how low earning wages are the reason poverty levels in Tulare County have remained stagnant. Based on the background, we can see how the Central Valley is rich in agriculture, specifically Tulare, Fresno, and Kern County, which are all neighboring counties. And I decided to kind of approach this in 3 ways. So I measured the education levels, the family income, specifically those who fall below the poverty threshold, as well as individuals in Tulare County who participate through like food stamps or SNAP. And I decided to break that down even further into rural versus urban, only because Tulare County is a big component of Tulare County is kind of more so rural areas. And what I found was that those who are living below the poverty line often fall within the demographic where those tend to be less educated or have earned up to like a high school diploma. And this is correlated with the types of jobs and occupations that they can apply for, which makes sense, but there's still that disparity of people who are living below the poverty line. And my policy suggestion is more so kind of like increase and raise minimum wage. But I also found that occupations, the specific kinds of occupations that are available in this area kind of cater to either agriculture or education or administrative work. And this kind of hints to we need to further develop as a county in Tulare County. And in addition to that, I also found that the rural areas in Tulare County tend to be need the most help. And so my suggestion is also to like increase funding for these programs, as you can see that there is a lot of food insecurity. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Great, thank you so much, Alondra. And so Alondra interned also with the Consulate General of Mexico. And so if anyone in the office would like to go ahead and ask the first question or ask the question. All right, and if not, we'll go ahead and open it up to the general audience. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, or if you're on the academic team, you can just go and jump in.
Hey, Alondra, this is Professor Jordan Quila here. I have a question for you about your policy suggestions. Basically, you mentioned, different employment opportunities. I was wondering what type, if you can be more specific about the types of employment opportunities, or if you're talking about like job retraining, or what you kind of think of that could really help these kind of rural communities in terms of these type of, occupational issues.
Just more occupations, kind of. One, I think it'd be really helpful to have like organizations kind of catering to the needs of the community, but the approach would be hiring people who kind of specialize in this area, people who have gotten their graduate degrees or bachelor's degrees.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Alondra, and thank you, Jordan, for the question. And so our next student is Daisy Baez.
Everyone. Is that all? Yes.
Yep, there we go. Thank you. Looks great.
Everyone, my name is Daisy Baez. I am a political science public service student at the University of California, Davis, and today I will be speaking to you all about financial literacy disparities in California. So California's economy is amongst the largest in the United States. However, it ranks lowest in integrating financial literacy into its state educational standards. In my research, I've compared financial literacy among demographics such as the Hispanic, Asian American, and white communities, and I identified factors that contribute to their financial literacy. I hypothesize that a formal education will be a main contributor to financial literacy. Now, Financial literacy is defined as the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources effectively for a lifetime of well-being. Financial behavior is related to how people treat, manage, and use the available financial resources they have. I've measured financial literacy using employer-sponsored retirement plan coverage from the Public Policy Institute. So in figure 2, you can see that are likely to have an employer that did not offer them an employer-sponsored retirement plan coverage, meaning that they would have to look elsewhere when it comes to their retirement planning. After doing a comparative case analysis of previous case studies, my findings suggest that the 2 biggest factors that contribute to financial literacy are both formal and informal, meaning that a formal form of education would be you find the education in school, hence teachers, college, etc. And informal would be you obtaining that knowledge through your parents or family members. So our communities are only as strong as the people who live in them. The economic health of states, counties, and cities are dependent on residents' financial health and wealth and well-being, or health and stability. Therefore, I have a few policy suggestions that may come into play. So given my research analysis, I believe that there needs to be further analysis into financial literacy programs, both local programs that are offered in California and programs that are offered in similar states, in states that are similar to California, such as Texas, New York, and Florida. That way we can find more information on what is the most efficient way of bringing these programs and these curriculums into the state standardized curriculum for public education in California. I believe with the lack of resources that usually come with public education, a more feasible alternative may be to have a financial guidance advisor in high schools. Just as we do have counselors for academics, it'd be really nice to have a financial guidance advisor right before a lot of high school students are about to make big financial decisions once they graduate. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your time. I'm open for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Daisy. And so now we're going to go ahead and go into questions. And so Daisy interned with the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce this term. And so if anyone from the office will can go ahead and ask the first question. So if you just raise your hand, I can go ahead and unmute you. Yes. All right, great. Kathy Rodriguez. There we go. Carrie, there we go. Oh, Hey, Kathy, I'm unmuting you, but it's not, could you maybe unmute on your slide too? It's, oh, there we go.
Did that work?
Yep, perfect.
Okay,
yep.
Perfect. So Daisy, great job. I know you've been a long time trying to get this all together. So what do you think would be, if you gave anyone, a family, starting out, what's like the number one piece of advice you would give to them from your findings that they need to do right now to help, build that generational wealth?
I believe money management at a young age is probably the most important, because right before the students go to school, they'll at least have that sense of like empowerment, and they'll also be able to make decisions, like financial decisions on their own. And once they get older, I think they'll have a better understanding of ways to manage their money, but not only so that, but also invest, or just find what they find of value and then invest in that, or look to fund that. I think often in the Hispanic community, it's not really shared. I think money is usually something that is for parents, and parents handle it themselves. But I think sharing that knowledge with your kids is just really helpful. It really gives a sense of empowerment, and it's just exposure at an early age, I think, is the most important.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Daisy, for the presentation. Thank you so much, Kathy, for the question and also for hosting Daisy this term. So we much appreciated. So thank you. And then our next student is Gordon Huang.
Hi everyone, my name is Gordon. I'm a senior at UCSC and I'm here to talk about shared electric scooters. Contribute 40% of California's greenhouse gas inventory compared to the nation's average of 28%. While most vehicle trips are short, most Californians continue to choose to drive to work alone. However, with the introduction of shared electric scooters in 2017, the platform has gained over 38 million trips, with trips averaging 1 to 1.5 miles. In addition, there are notable spikes in usage during commuting hours and looks to see whether people are replacing their short automobile trips with shared electric scooters. I hypothesize cities in California that adopt shared electric scooters show improvement in their air quality index. By looking at eight urban California populations with and without shared electric scooters, I find that all areas examined experience improvements in the air quality index, which may have been reasons due other than shared electric scooters. However, shared electric scooter companies are actively hiding their mobility data. Local governments in California looking to adopt shared electric scooters must require companies to provide their mobility data to the public in order to obtain operating permits. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Gordon. And so Gordon interned with the Sacramento Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. And so if someone from Sac Metro Chamber had a question, you go ahead and raise your hand and I can go ahead and unmute you. All right, and then we can go ahead and take a question from the general audience.
Hey, Gordon. Ross here, TA for all your classes. So I used to love e-scooters and jump bikes and all that stuff, and I live in Sacramento, and now we don't have any of them really anymore. And I think part of that is because Uber wants to pull out of. I mean, they got out of the jump bike game in general, but now that we've done all this pandemic stuff, I want you to like look in your crystal ball and think about like, do you think we're gonna still use e-scooters and jump bikes and stuff in the future? Like, it's outside, so maybe it's like not as prone to spreading, any illnesses, but I just want to get your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think with COVID, people look to commute more efficiently and affordably. People would be turning to share electric scooters, but they would be disinfecting them and making them more clean before using them. I think it's better than public transit where there aren't a lot of people breathing in and being so close to one another.
Great,
Cool.
thank you so much, Gordon, and thank you, Ross, for the question. And so our next student is Ethan Nash.
Alrighty, hello. My name is Ethan Nash, and my research question is, do states that legalize recreational marijuana see a rise in homelessness? This is significant, especially in California, because the state already has 1/4 of the nation's homeless, and recreational marijuana became legal in 2018. My hypothesis is that states' homelessness rates would increase following implementation of legalization of recreational marijuana. This is largely due to a green rush, which is a large migration towards states that legalize from states that have not. For my research, I started with the time series study that compared total homelessness for states that legalized both before and after legalization. Then I compared data over the same time period with similar states that did not legalize. The states I chose to study were ones that legalized first, since there was a lot more data. The medium-sized states were Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, which are all very similar to each other. So I chose to compare those states as a group and compare them to Minnesota, Utah, Oklahoma, Arizona, and Wisconsin. I also obviously chose California, which is a large state, and compared it to the similar state of New York and Florida. What I found was that states that legalized recreational marijuana saw much higher annual increases in homelessness following legalization. This was not the same for states that did not legalize, which actually saw decreasing levels of homelessness in their state, with the exception of Arizona, which had decreasing homelessness over both periods. I also looked into migration rates for states that legalized, and the only state with conclusive data was Colorado, which saw a sudden spike immediately following legalization, as shown on the graph at the top right. However, Oregon and Washington had already been experiencing high levels of immigration over the entire time period, so a spike could not be detected. California is also inconclusive, which can be tied to the sheer size of the state. I concluded that there may be a correlation between legalization of recreational marijuana and increased homelessness. The data suggests that there is, but it would require much more research with more states over a longer period of time, which is simply not available yet. The biggest policy suggestion that I have would be using large portions of tax-generated revenue from recreational marijuana to fund programs that reduce homelessness and increase affordable housing. This allows the problem to fix itself, and it's something that some states are already doing, such as Colorado. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ethan. And so Ethan interned with the Sacramento Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. And so if someone from Shack Chamber had a question, go ahead and raise your hand and I can go ahead and unmute you. All right, and then if not, we'll go ahead and take a question from the general audience.
Hey, Ethan, this is Professor Jordan Quila. I have a question for you here. Kind of getting at kind of the theory aspect of it. I'm just kind of curious as to what kind of the causal mechanism. Why is there a green rush? What is it kind of that goes behind this? Why is it kind of driving? If this is correct or not? What exactly is occurring? I mean, what is it about these marijuana legalization that's driving more homeless people to kind of come to these states or this to happen? I was just wondering if you had more information on that potentially.
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to it. The first part is there is populations, people who are already homeless, people who are transients who move into these areas, obviously, so they don't have to deal with police. They can recreationally buy it. It's a lot easier to come by now in these states, obviously, because it's legal, and they obviously don't have to deal with the criminality of it. And the other aspect is that I'm actually studying too in Washington is a lot of people are moving into the state who weren't previously homeless. They're looking for jobs in the marijuana industry. However, the jobs don't exist yet because it's just getting going, and they end up becoming homeless while they're there. A lot of states don't have enough affordable housing available, and that's how these large migrations can kind of impact immediate homeless. And that's a big thing, I think, with my policy suggestion that suggests more funding from that revenue to increase affordable housing and homelessness, which will help decrease this problem.
Awesome, great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Ethan, and thank you, Jordan, for the question. And so our next student is Charlie Rojas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlie Rojas, and I'm finishing my undergraduate degree at UC Davis Political Science with the UCCS program. I decided to conduct my research project on the racial disparity in the U.S. criminal justice system. So, as it stands, the overrepresentation of racial minorities in arrests and the prison populations continues to persist. Here in California, the incarceration rate per 100,000 is about 9 times greater for African Americans than it is for white people, ranking us amongst the highest racial disparities of the country through that metric. So, why is there a disparity? The explanation that I chose to test was income inequality. My hypothesis was states with higher income inequality will have a greater racial disparity in incarceration rates. I used Gini coefficients to measure income inequality and a ratio of Black and white incarceration rates to measure racial disparity. So, looking at the evidence, I performed a small N study with each state being a unit of analysis. I performed a simple correlation analysis for all states, as well as for a subset of states with the most income inequality. In addition to this, I did a multivariate regression analysis to determine the relationship between income inequality and racial disparity. Essentially, the evidence rejected my hypothesis using the variables I chose. However, I do believe that the regression analysis I ran left the door open to further research on this issue at the city level with different variables. There are great implications of the issue if it isn't addressed. The racial disparity in the prison population is a problem in and of itself. Furthermore, such a large racial disparity in the U.S. justice system renders it illegitimate for many, especially for the racial groups most affected by it. In an effort to address this issue, the policy recommendation that I believe would help lessen the racial disparity in incarceration would be to invest in high school completion rate. One study found that 68% of African-American men that dropped out were incarcerated by the age of 30. High school completion will also help in reducing overall income inequality by giving more people an opportunity than their dropout counterparts to make more money. And with that, I'm going to open up to you guys for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Charlie. And so Charlie interned with the Office of Sacramento City Council member, Rick Jennings. And so if the internship host office had a question, go ahead and raise your hand and I can go ahead and unmute you. Otherwise, we will open it up to the general audience. All right, we'll go ahead and open up a question from the general audience.
Hey, Charlie, this is Professor Jordan Quila. I have a question for you. Looking at figure 1 here, being from the state of Minnesota, you see very much so that, right, there's a pretty stark disparity in Black and white incarceration rates there. And I'm wondering if part of it, you mentioned kind of measurement issues. One thing that we found recently, obviously given the situation in Minneapolis, is that there's a great disparity between median income amongst whites and Blacks in Minnesota. And I'm wondering if you were able to actually look at the data, if you use the Gini coefficient, which looked at disparity in income, but across races, right? I was wondering what your thoughts would be if you were to have a measure of income that's a disparity between races, if you think that would be more correlated with kind of these types of inequalities.
Well, my guess is that they would be more correlated, and that is consistent with kind of what's known as strain theory. That's a criminology and sociology theory that was developed in the 1940s. It's kind of a theory that suggests that people who are pressured to meet kind of society goals impressed upon them by society, such as pursuing an American dream, for example, are pressured to do those things even if they don't have the means to do so. So that would include maybe committing crimes, selling drugs, participating in prostitution, things like that. And like I said, as you can see in the research poster that I have, there is kind of a problem with getting the data between races and getting medium incomes for those races, and as well as between families to see interactions with that. But my hypothesis would be that it would affect it. There would be a correlation there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Jordan, for the question. And so our last student to present is Paula Mercado.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Paula Mercado, and my project focuses on the funding and access of education in California state prisons. Current research indicates that individuals who participate in education programs have a 51% lower odds of recidivating. The objective for my project was to identify the relationship between state funding and access of education programs and its effects on recidivism. Therefore, I predicted that by increasing state funding and access to education programs in the carceral system reduces recidivism rates. In order to test my hypothesis, I focused on 36 state prisons. I collected data from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitations to analyze the state funding, the actual enrollment rate, the completion of education programs, and I I went ahead and compared it to the recidivism rates of the last 4 years, of the recent 4 years. So my finding indicates that with the increase of state funding in rehabilitation programs, it has led to a slight and steady increase of education programs offered within the 36 state prisons. However, the completion of education programs are significantly low, along with the steady recidivism rates of the last 4 years. Indicate that policies such as realignment, Prop 36, Prop 47 have contributed to the decrease of recidivism and not education. So since current data provides a statewide number of participants in education programs, my suggestion for future research on this topic would be to incorporate the number of inmates released that have completed education programs and incorporate that in the CDCR's annual recidivism rate report. This will allow us to go ahead and see the correlation between the completion of education programs and its possible long-term effects on recidivism rates, if any. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. And so this term, Paula, intern of the UC Berkeley Center for Community Innovation. And so if there is a question from the internship host site, go ahead and raise your hand. I can go ahead and unmute you. Great, Renee.
Yes, this is Renee Elias from Center for Community Innovation. Great work, Paula. It was wonderful to hear your presentation. I was just interested about your recommendation to increase state funding to rehabilitation programs. Given the climate we're in right now, where we're dealing with a lot of budget cuts and we're dealing with new priorities around health, I'm wondering if you came across any examples of programs that that kind of were able to be done in kind of a cost-effective way. And I don't know if this is within the scope of the research that you did, but anything that just kind of could respond to those who are like, oh, well, we can't really increase state funding right now. So what are other ways we can address this problem?
That's a really great question. I was not able to come across that information. What I did find were a lot of recent reportings of post-secondary education pilot programs from community colleges that provided a lot of suggestions of other factors addressing the inability for inmates to participate or even complete, and it's mainly due to funding. Either they're on wait lists, there's not sufficient supply or funding for textbooks, or they don't have the space, and there are either a lack of staff. A lot of community colleges too are seeking additional funds and resources and sponsors and donations outside of the state funding that was given to them by Senate Bill 1391. So unfortunately, I haven't come across any positive outcomes or any other positive suggestions to suggest to limit funding, other than the information and the reports that I have received from the current post-secondary education responses from the community colleges.
Great, thank you so much, Paula, and thank you so much, Renee, for hosting Paula this term. And so, so we actually do have some time for just kind of an open Q&A, and so I'll go ahead and open it up to basically the audience in terms of any of the questions for any of the students.